Amazon One Medical presents Painful Thoughts.
I've been on hold to make a doctor's appointment for 23 minutes now. The automated voice has told me 47 times that my call is very important to them. I'm starting to think that they don't think my call is important at all.
With Amazon One Medical 24/7 virtual care, you'll get help fast without having to remain on the line to make an appointment. Amazon One Medical. Healthcare just got less painful.
Your body is brilliant. Nature's Bounty has a bounty of solutions to help you thrive, supporting your systems from your head to your heels. Nature's Bounty High Absorption Magnesium Glycinate supports heart, bone, nerve, and muscle health, while just one hair growth capsule a day helps grow thicker, fuller hair. Delicious new Nature's Bounty Probiotic Gummies contain prebiotics and postbiotics, supporting gut health, regularity, and immune health. Nature's Bounty. It's in your nature. Learn more at naturesbounty.com. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. These products are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
You've landed at Spark Launch, the guide star for embracing what it means to be neurodiverse. I'm Mike Cornell, joined by CEO of Spark Launch, Chaya. Here, we navigate mental health triumphs and tribulations from all across the spectrum, charting a course to the shared experiences that unite us, and discovering how to embody the unique strengths within neurodivergent and neurotypical alike, igniting your spark and launching it into a better tomorrow. Hello there, I'm Mike.
I'm Chaya.
And today we want to welcome on the show Christian Vinceneux, who has spent his entire life immersed in the neurodivergent experience. Growing up in France as a shy, anxious child with ADHD in a neurodiverse family shaped his perspective from an early age. And with over 30 years of experience as an occupational therapist for neurodiverse families, Christian has transitioned to coaching parents, raising children with ADHD and autism. His unique approach focuses on helping parents navigate the complexities of neurodivergence, offering practical solutions to everyday challenges while fostering a strong neuro-affirming relationship with their child. Welcome.
Thank you, Mike. And thank you, Chaya. I'm excited to be here and appreciate the opportunity to have this chat with you kids.
Yeah, thank you, Christian. So how did growing up with ADHD in France look like back then?
That was a very, very long time ago, but it's, like many other neurodivergent folks, I didn't know about it. My parents didn't know about it. Nobody knew about it. So I grew up in the 60s and 70s, and, ADHD was just beginning to be talked about in medical circles. And at the time in France, my belief is that France was a little more behind when it came to understanding neurodivergence in the right way, as opposed to the US. So nobody knew. So I think my recollection is that I had a lot of instances where I was told that I had to focus better, I had to get better organized. I would frequently lose my stuff from school. So I would come home in the winter and would have lost my gloves, and lost my scarf and my hat and hands. So it was, Christian, what you need to pay better attention. What did you do with it? So there was that. There were the teachers telling my parents and me over and over that I was not working to my potential, that I should be getting straight A's, that I was super smart, but that I just did not apply myself sufficiently. And and then there was some other, I had a lot of anxiety, didn't know what to do about it. Nobody really knew about it. And then I think my saving grace was my dad was, I don't know exactly which diagnosis he had, but he was definitely neurodivergent and very smart, very kind, very loving, always showed up for us, but he was extremely sensitive. So he was definitely, he would at the least get a highly sensitive person label today, and he had a lot of sensory challenges. For example, he didn't like the wind, so he loved to go outside, he loved to go explore and visit towns or go on day trips and take us along. But if it got too windy, then we had to come back, or we had to go inside, or go inside a museum, or somewhere, because it was too dysregulating for him, or there was too much noise, or if there were too many transitions, or the pass was too fast, or there were too many people, or it was noisy, or so just a lot of those, fairly common sensory triggers, but that, for some people it's not that big of a deal. And for him, everybody knew in the family that we talk about it with a little smile. It was not mean. It was not sarcastic, but we knew that dad was quirky. We knew that dad needed a lot of certain things to be aligned to feel okay. And that there was a lot of risk or a lot of potential for things to not go as planned. And then dad was going to get a little cranky. It never escalated, but we just knew that. And so I said it was my saving grace because somehow without my dad receiving any education about what was going on with him or with his nervous system, he knew how to find his happy place. And he knew what bothered him. And there were different times. Things were a little more, the pace of life tended to be a little slower. There was no social media. We were not hyper connected every single moment. And so his happy place was, it could have been in the evening sitting on the sofa and listening to classical music being pumped out throughout the house. And because that just Mozart regulated it. And, it could have been sitting on a bench in a really beautiful place watching something nature or city park and just sitting with us and chit-chatting a little bit, but just slowing down and it really influenced me. And I for me it was my normal, right? It was my everyday kind of living. And so on one hand I had the anxiety and I had all those things that made me feel awkward and uncomfortable and but I also saw my dad just being really quirky and nobody giving him really a hard time about it, and him really providing me with a sort of template of how it looks like to self-regulate. And I really believe that he was my first teacher in terms of understanding what self-regulation is and how it looks like to be dysregulated, or his version, because everybody has a different version of being dysregulated, and how it looked like or what we could do to be better regulated, slowing down or really being intentional about the environment that we were in, or the schedule that we had, the pace that we had. And so, growing up, I didn't realize that. And it was, much later in life that I started appreciating those lessons that were, not conscious on his part, but it was, I definitely attribute, a lot of my growth today to those earlier lessons.
You've spent a lot of time reflecting on your childhood. And I see that connection with the work that you do today, helping parents and children. And even back then, we didn't know, right? It was the same situation for me. I think my dad, for sure, was neurodivergent because of some of the traits that he displayed, but we didn't know. There were no labels, there were no categories, but just knowing that now is amazing. So that's why it's so important to accept that diagnosis, because there's wealth of information, right? So get the label without the label. Learn the traits, learn the secrets of yourself, because that's what these diagnoses do to you.
I agree. And it's, I think, I talk with a lot of people online as part of, being on social media and creating content and interacting with people on the subject of neurodivergence. And there's so many people who shared, how helpful the diagnosis was. And I've, run into quite a bit of people who at first are a little bit shocked or maybe depressed, thinking, oh, I had no idea, or because there's a lot of stigma still in a lot of circles and a lot of different layers of our societies. There's a lot of stigma about having a diagnosis, whether it's ADHD or autism, whatever it is, dyslexia. And so there's still people upon receiving a diagnosis who are, shocked or were, somewhat depressed, thinking, oh no, I'm one of those people. And, with all the stigma attached to it. But typically, fairly quickly, what I've seen is that upon receiving a diagnosis, people start connecting the dots. And it usually lifts a lot of self-blame about, oh, all the struggles that I had. Wow, it was not a character flaw. It was not my fault. It's not like I was not lazy. I was not, it's just the way my brain is wired. And there are times where, if I'm intentional or if I understand what my brain needs, I can absolutely function better and have, better quality of life and do the things that I want to do. But if I don't understand why I'm struggling, then, things are going to be a lot more difficult. So, I would say that usually, as long as the diagnosis is correct, because unfortunately we still have, a lot of people who get the wrong diagnosis and who just, kept spinning their wheels about with going in one direction with the diagnosis to, maybe years later realizing that was not the correct diagnosis. But assuming we receive the right diagnosis, I think it's incredibly helpful. And it doesn't really solve any of our challenges, but it allows us, it opens the door and it shows us a direction of where to focus, where to seek information, or, okay, I have ADHD, so let me read everything I can on ADHD. Let me, listen to podcasts. Let me watch videos. Let me talk to other people who have ADHD and start comparing and start learning more about myself through that lens.
Yeah, you just described my experience of being diagnosed like pitch perfectly to a scary degree. Yeah, particularly just the release of this isn't a character flaw. This isn't something that I'm doing incorrectly for whatever reason. It's something that's just happening with me. Do you notice a difference between how people or even children specifically are treated about traits they have pre-diagnosis versus post-diagnosis?
It's a great question. I think it really depends on the level of understanding of people around the child. So, first line of defense, usually the parents, and it often helps the parents. But again, the parents are also, everyone is part of a greater system of beliefs and of information so for some parents, it's because of the stigma associated with neurodivergent and still, the lack of understanding of it. There are quite a bit of parents who are really upset with the diagnosis because they come from a perspective of wanting their child to be normal and based on what they've perceived normality to be. And because of the stigma that we have around neurodivergence and how it was first introduced to everyone, it was introduced through a medical model. So it meant that, if you're neurodivergent, it's something wrong. It's a diagnosis is a medical problem. So then, the solutions are either to find a cure or find some way to correct the problem that you have. So so a lot of parents struggle with that, feeling like, oh, my kid is never going to be okay, or, I want my kid to not look ADHD or whatever that means. And then you have, parents, and it can be the same over time, who just learn, get better information, or who work with providers who have a more neuro-affirming approach and who say, hey, look, your kid is just fine. As long as you understand what's going to help your child be their best and how you can empower them to be their best and how you can help your child understand why they have this need to, whatever it is, to move around a lot or to, switch topics a lot or to have a lot of different hobbies and start one and then a week later start another one. And once you understand where it comes from, then you can work with it. But so I see both. I see parents who really struggle at first, trying to almost deny the diagnosis or wanting to, seeing it as something that really prevents their child from being who they are. And then I see the parents who little by little, just keep learning and find ways to, and change their ways after receiving a diagnosis and really seek information to really understand how they can best support their child.
I think it comes down to attitude, right? What kind of an attitude do we all carry? Is it positive? Do we have a growth mindset? I think that defines everything. And how do we look at mental health? And how do we view mental health in others? All of that come into play. And mental health doesn't have to be a permanent feature, right? The issue with challenges that we face with mental health could be temporary, but it's critical that we address it in the right way in that moment and accept it, because just accepting, we have a mental health problem will put us in the path of growth. So I think view the diagnosis with positive mindset as a place where we're receiving information about ourselves. Just that, with that, we can just move forward.
I agree. There's a lot that goes into it, because there's, how we receive a diagnosis is, it's based on so many things, right? Can also be based on our culture, all levels of culture, the culture of our family, the culture that, the greater culture that we operate with, the country that we're in, the different groups that we're part of, and all that's going to make a difference. Access to information. I see, there's been a big jump in awareness of neurodivergence and discussions about neurodivergence since social media, since the explosion of social media. So, we all know that social media isn't always great, and there are lots of, potential problems with it, but social media has given people a platform, a free platform to share. And so, you get on any platform and you see someone sharing about their ADHD symptoms. And then you have someone else respond and say, oh, these are exactly my symptoms, but I have something else. And this, and we didn't have that 20 something years ago. And it was a lot more difficult to find information. You had to, go look for some magazine, psychology magazine or something, and hoping that there would be some article about what you were looking for on it, that it wasn't interactive, and it was still very much coming from, providers or experts, but there was not that voice from, the people who were actually dealing with the diagnosis or with the condition. And so I've seen that as being really helpful in helping more people who didn't necessarily have access to that information before, being able to catch up a bit, so to speak, and educate themselves and realize like, oh, I'm not alone, or, oh, just making you think more because you hear about somebody else's experience and like, oh, that's a little different, but oh, they're very sound sensitive, and in certain situations, oh, I'm sound sensitive, but not in that situation. And it just, it makes us, it contributes to raising our own self-awareness. So I think that's really helpful.
The social media, I think, can be used for the good or bad. It's all how you use that tool. It's the same with anything, right? Money, any kind of a tool we have has power. And how do you use that power is up to us. Because if you use it in the right way, it's going to make you proud. It doesn't matter whether you find a client, but you feel good about yourself because you shared yourself authentically with the right intention. Ultimately, I think we're all here to make ourselves proud, but because deep down, we know we're all amazing people. So if once we get rid of the shadows, we can tap into that light.
I love the way you put it. Yeah. I love what you said about, we all want to be proud, and then the getting rid of the shadows part, I think is a great way of framing it.
To transition a little bit to both your work as an occupational therapist and coach, tell me about the pitfalls of trying to fix problems.
Well, when we try to fix problems, it's the problem with that is that it usually means that we're coming in with a certain mindset or certain expectations of exactly what is wrong, and that we want, let's say in the case of a parent-child relationship, that we want the child to be certain ways, to fit in better, or to do X, Y, Z, and so fixing usually misses the boat because it doesn't really take into account all the possible reasons why the child is struggling. And so it looks more at bringing in a potential solution, but that is not really curated or individualized for the child. One of my favorite sayings in the context of parent-child relationship is that your child is not giving you a hard time. They are having a hard time. I like it a lot because it really shifts the mindset. If you believe that your child is giving you a hard time, then of course, you're going to be more likely as a parent to look at things from a compliance standpoint and from a punitive standpoint, saying you need to stop doing this, period, without looking at, well, why is my child not doing what I'm asking them to do? And where they're bad, they're lazy, they know better. Maybe they know better, but they still can't do it. And it's not don't want to do it. It's they can't do it in that moment. Doesn't mean that they can't in 10 minutes from now or tomorrow or in 6 months from now. But so really looking at it from the perspective of, okay, if your child is not doing what they need, they are having a hard time. So why are they having a hard time? Is it, if let's say, classic example, if the child is not transitioning well, each time you ask them to transition, whether, to get ready for school or get ready for homework or come to dinner, whatever the situation is, they're not transitioning. They're stalling the process, or they're complaining, or they're melting down, or they're whatever the case is. Why are they not transitioning? Well, it could be that they're having a hard time coming up with a plan to do the next thing. Now, this may sound really obscure and may seem like it doesn't make sense, but many kids with ADHD are in the process of developing, executive functioning skills, and they may completely understand the task of getting ready and for example getting dressed, but if they're let's say playing with something, playing with a video game, or doing something else, that act of transitioning and focusing on the first step that they need to do might be really difficult for them, and they're not doing it on purpose. It's just that their brain is all over the place and is having to a really hard time to focus, to identify, well, what's that next step that I need to do. It could be because just the that with ADHD and neurodivergence in general, there's most commonly an emotional regulation component. So meaning that it's harder for us to regulate our emotions, meaning that if we become upset about something or sad about something or confused, we're much more likely to be overwhelmed by it in the moment. And those emotions tend to flood our brain to the point where it's just a little harder to think clearly and to know what we need to do. And so we're more focused trying to, handle all those floods of emotions as opposed to being able to do the thing that we're asked to do. So from the outside, it looks like we're just wasting time. It looks like we're not focusing, not being responsible, not being, all the statements. So, another situation could be if you have a child who's, let's say, really hyper, and it's time to sit down for dinner or for homework or whatever the case is, and the child just keeps, moving around and jumping and touching everything and running and laughing, and a very common response is to tell the child, you just need to settle down. You need to calm down. Well, the problem with that is that the child has no idea why they're doing the things that they're doing. They have no idea why their body is hyper. Nobody's explained it to them. Teachers won't explain it to them. Pediatricians won't explain it to them. And then the kid has no idea of how to calm their body. So if you think of, you're being asked to solve a problem that you don't understand, and you don't even know you have that problem, or you don't know what to do. I mean, that's really confusing for the child. So if you add some more punitive compliance-based approaches where, you raise your voice, or you get really stern with the child, they may in that moment be able to settle down a little bit. They may be able to, calm themselves a little bit, but the problem with that is that they're not learning anything. All they're learning is how to respond to fear. And it doesn't teach them any, it doesn't raise their awareness about what's going on with the body and how to handle it and how to cope with disappointment, or how to cope with transitions, or how to cope with, whatever the case is. So for me, in the example of a child who's being really hyper and not following directions, and instead of telling him, you need to calm down, my approach is to tell the child, it's to first acknowledge what's going on without any judgment, and trying to have the most neutral tone as possible, which is really hard in the heat of the moment, right, for parents. Say something like, I can tell your body is moving a lot. I can tell you have a lot of energy. I can tell, it looks like it's really hard for you right now to sit still. So when you use those kinds of phrases, most of the time, the child will acknowledge that, will say, yes, so hard, or yes, I don't want to, I can't stop. I can't, my body wants to move all the time. And and then the next step is to say, well, maybe to validate. So, well, no wonder why it's hard to do homework when your body wants to move so much. So again, you're validating, you're giving little nuggets of insights to the child, helping them understand that, okay, I'm not blaming you for it. I'm just acknowledging that and creating a link between, if your body's moving a lot, that's going to make it harder to do some other tasks. It's not a judgment, just a fact. And then from there, we can go to the next step and say, well, I wonder what could help your body try to get rid of some of that energy, some of that extra energy, and maybe that would make it easier to set for homework. I wonder what we could do together. The child may say, I don't know, or they may come up with an idea and they say, I want to ride my bike. Okay, or maybe we can, ride your bike for around the block. Let's just go for 5 minutes, or let's go jump on the trampoline in the yard for a few minutes, or let's, whatever might work for that child and for that family. And then after that, you come back and say, well, let's try it. Let's try homework again. Now, of course, there's a risk that if it's not done well, that the child will start using that thing that concept that, the trampoline or the bike to say, oh, I can't focus. I need to go ride my bike again. So of course it needs to be presented in certain ways with, a certain amount of structure but then helping the child reflect and say, oh, hey, I can tell you're a little calmer. I think maybe, riding your bike or jumping on the trampoline helped your body, helped your mind to feel a little bit calmer. Or maybe it didn't help. It's like, okay, you know what? It didn't help. Hey, we tried. And next time we're going to try something else again. I'm pretty sure we can find something that's going to help. This is what teaches self-awareness. This is what teaches, without putting any shame on the child. And it teaches a growth mindset. It encourages a growth mindset because it's telling the child, a fixed mindset would be, oh, you can't do this, forget it. This is never going to work. The growth mindset is, okay, well, jumping on the trampoline didn't work. It actually made you more hyper. Oh my gosh, you have so much energy now. We learned something together. Okay, so let's try something again, something different next time that will be different. And that's what fosters the growth mindset. That's what places the child in the trajectory of wanting to learn about themselves and wanting to understand how their mind and the body operates and what can help them. And because, I've been at this my whole life and I'm still discovering strategies and some strategies work great for a while and then they don't work anymore. And so we constantly need to explore and figure things out and try new things and our lives change, our schedules change, our routines change. So what worked for a while doesn't apply anymore. But having, I wanted to use this example because that's one way to, support your child in that moment. So does it take more time? Absolutely. And you can't do this necessarily every single minute. In the long run, that's what's going to help the child develop in the way where they're more self-aware. They're more, I've worked with, when I worked as an occupational therapist, I worked hands-on with the children I was in the clinic space. It was like a big playroom. And so I worked with children, day in and day out, 5 days a week. And I had clients back to back, session after session. And I had a lot of children who, first came in and were extremely dysregulated or not wanting to be there or feeling somehow ashamed because so many people had, they had received so much negative feedback about what they were doing wrong. And because I was always using a neuroaffirming approach, pretty quickly they would feel good. They would feel good about coming to my space and working with me. And what I would see over time is children starting to be able to advocate for themselves. Because at every session, for example, assuming the child was verbal, because times I've worked with children who were not, who were for example, who had autism and were nonverbal, but even nonverbal, there was a way to encourage self-expression and awareness. But for example, I would always ask the child, I wonder how you're feeling today. I wonder how much energy you have today. I wonder if you have a lot of energy and you want to do something really active today. I wonder if you want to be more mellow and do something more quiet where we sit down. And most of the time they were able to tell me, not at first when I started working with them, but after a while of using that approach, that framework, they would have the self-awareness and they would be able to tell me, I have so much energy, I have to move. Okay, let's do some really active things. Then let's learn let's find out how it helps your nervous system, how it helps your mind, how it helps your body. And so after a while, I would see those kids being able to, verbalize to their parents or to their teachers, I'm sorry, I can't focus because my body has too much energy right now. And if it was built into the, in U.S. public schools, there's for children who have a disability or they can receive an IEP, which is, stands for Individualized Educational Plan. And so, those approaches then could be built into the IEP where somehow, teachers knew that, okay, when this child reaches their limit, they may need to go for a walk, for a 5-minute walk, outside, or they may need to walk around the classroom, maybe to decompress a little bit, or there would be another activity that could be planned for them. So it does work. It's not a quick fix, but it's, as usual, when we go for quick fixes, it's it often backfires. So that was a long set of information.
It was wealthy information. And you brought about an important point. If we don't learn the skills in childhood, we're going to carry that into our adult life. So learning skills of with the growth mindset and not learning from fear, because fear doesn't teach us anything. It just teaches us how to respond, how to shut down. So outwardly, it might look like the child is behaving, but internally, they haven't learned anything. In fact, it's done worse things to them because they've learned to bottle it up all inside and just put on this front for the adult. So what you just shared is so important for the child to love itself the way it is, and then learn to overcome the challenges, because that's what's going to carry through into being a happy adult.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's it's really a shame that with pretty much all, I'm not sure it's not all, but it feels like all the people I interact with, social media, and then through my own clients, all the adults who identify as neurodivergent with one condition or another, all report fairly high level of shame about their neurodivergence, and the level of shame about, I hear a lot of apologizing. Oh, I'm sorry. I should have, oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, I'm terrible at this. I'm terrible at that. Oh, I'm sorry. And ADHD does not give us guilt or shame. It's the environment that we grew up in. It's the responses that we receive that create shame. That there's nothing in the biology, in the neurobiology of ADHD that triggers shame. It's just, but it's, I'm pretty sure I'm going to go off a tangent a little bit, but I'm pretty sure from an evolutionary standpoint that, that there were always people who were neurodivergent. And I'm certain that at some point, thousands of years ago, I'm trying to picture people who were ADHD. Well, there was no, people didn't, even if there was some kind of writing system in the culture that they were in, writing was not the main form of interaction in those days. So everything was more physically based, or it's based on interaction, or so what would someone with ADHD, someone who, let's say, who was more, there's lots of different forms of ADHD, but let's say someone who was more, very physical, who'd love to move, who'd love to, do things with their body, well, they may have most likely gravitated toward occupations that did that, and they were most likely celebrated because they were great. Now, and then you fast forward today, where, for example, there's a lot of details that we have to do throughout our lives. A lot of details about, because our life is online. Our life is, involves calendars and schedules and emails and very accurate details. And so it could be that, a lot of the things that ADHD folks struggle with today would not have been a problem thousands of years ago, because life was, set up in a different way. And so it's more like, when we're trying to, fit a square peg into a round hole, that's when the problems start happening, and I remember, my mom was an accountant. She was a very good accountant, and she loved her work, and she talked about it, and, in ways that almost made me believe that I could have been an accountant. At some point I considered it, because she talked about it with passion and with interest, and she had stories, and and then at some point I realized that, oh, I would be so bored, because I was good with numbers. I was always good with numbers, so that kind of like gave me the started to believe that, oh, maybe that's a good occupation for me. And then I realized I would be bored out of my mind, because it would have worked for me for a day or for a while, but then I would have just been craving that more interaction and more creative projects and more, I was joking. So, give me some complex emotional problems about neurodivergence or complex behavior problems anytime. Give me that to solve. I'll be there. I find it interesting. I find it, I'm passionate about it. But, have me sit down a whole day to just look at numbers, I'll be bored. So I'm using this example to show the importance of the environment, because I think, what happens with often, and there's lots of intersecting factors, but there's education, right? The whole piece of education and how we handle education in our culture, and and how kids end up in one direction versus another, college or whatever the case is. And because we're not really as focused on helping kids really figure out how their brain functions and what gives them passion and what they're interested in. And then, we see a lot of adults who are neurodivergent and who are in a job that they dread and where they get, extremely, extremely stressed and sometimes, experience severe burnout. And they may get in trouble. They may get fired. They may get, a lot of negative feedback on their performance. And some of that negative feedback may be based on actual problems about their performance. I mean, they have, they're hired to do something and they can't do it, then that's a real problem. But to me, the problem is greater. It goes back to making sure that we don't end up in environments that don't work for us. And that can be really difficult because it's not, if you're in one of those environments and it's not the right place for you, for a lot of people, you can't change overnight. I mean, you can't, it might require to get more training or go back to school or, start over. And I mean, that's, I'm definitely not saying that it's easy, but with, we need to really pay attention to kind of like find a better match, try to line up how our nervous system works with the environment that we want to be in.
Yeah, environment is critical. So as adults, we at least have that power in us to move to the right environment. Although it seems challenging, but that is the challenge we have to overcome, not make ourselves force into liking something that we don't, or be in an environment that is not conducive, whether it's family, friends, colleagues, whatever that environment is. For neurodivergents, because they're so sensitive, they're so energetically sensitive, and they soak in all that's coming in from the environment. Environment is crucial for them, and it affects their mental health. It affects that joy. But as adults, I think we have to take ownership in creating that for ourselves. And that might be letting go of some aspects of our life, because our happiness is the most important thing. But for children, they don't have that power, right? So I think as parents, it's our duty to listen to them and overcome our own challenges, especially if you have an ADHD parent and an ADHD child. I saw that play out in my own house. So I had to change and learn about myself and learn about, why am I behaving? Why am I pushing my fears onto my son? But when I shifted, my son blossomed, and he's, knock on wood, really happy and just figuring out on his own. And I think it's, as parents, we have a bigger responsibility.
That's beautiful. You were able to do that and change course.
Yeah. And that's why the whole Spark launch is about, we all have that spark, right? Let's focus on that. And then, but to get to that spark, there's we have to overcome the shadow, the darkness, and that's our growth. I think that if we find our spark, we'll allow our child to have their spark. It's all kind of interconnected. We're all interconnected.
Yes, and I think what I often see is the struggle for parents to find the right balance between providing your child with as many opportunities as possible. Let's say there's time and money to involve them in martial art classes, just as a random example. And I've seen a lot of kids with neurodivergent kids actually benefit from martial arts. I don't do martial arts, but I've just seen so many, because I think it's slower. It develops, good body awareness. It helps the child to, in a way, to self-regulate a little better, become more mindful of the energy. So, but let's just take that example. It can, all those opportunities can really help the child to figure themselves out, to be in different environments, so it can be very rich in ways to support the child's social, emotional, physical development. But then what if the child says, no, I don't want to do that? After two sessions of karate or whatnot, says, I don't want to do that. That's stupid. I hate it. I want to play video games instead. Well, what do? Do you push or do you not push? Do you give up as soon as your child says, I don't want to do that? Which we know, kids don't have the same perspective as adults. So they may not have the perspective that, well, it may be tough the first couple times, or there may be a time where it's not as interesting, but they will become interesting again as you get better at it. Or so is this a case where we need to push the child? Or is this a case where we really need to listen to them and say, okay, let's just try something else? And I think that's one of the challenges that often comes up, one of the many challenges that comes up with with parenting a child with let's say ADHD, because every situation tends to be amplified. Every situation tends to be a little more complicated. And I think it really helps to have enough guidance or enough understanding of what's going on with your child in the moment, and to figure out, okay, is this a time where I need to push, or is this a time where I need to just let it go and try something else?
I think it's a dance that we have to learn to move with your child, because it is tricky. It is tricky, but I think there are clues, right? Because if we keep saying yes to everything that they're saying, you pay for the whole year and they want to quit after 2 classes. It can be tricky, but there are always lessons in everything. And so we learn from that in that moment and start weaving that into our next project together. So we keep learning and putting those lessons into that. And then you'll see within time, we would be in a better place as a parent and child, that I'm talking about that relationship, and it's all worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. But I like your point earlier about, I can't remember how you made it, but my takeaway was to look at how to address your child's regulation, because that's often, regulation is one of the most important pieces, but it's often one that is the most misunderstood and least addressed by all providers. And so it's been interesting because, through my content on social media, I talk about regulation a lot. I just finished writing a short ebook guide for parents raising a child with ADHD and autism on the topic of regulation, because I wanted to give parents at least a starting point. And through the comments on social media, so many people are talking about regulation that it's finally become a word it's a little more part of everyday conversations in the neurodivergent circles. However, most people don't really know how to do it. So the most common question is, okay, yeah, I get it, but how do I do it? How do I regulate my child? How do I regulate myself as a parent? So to the point, Chaya, that you made earlier about the parent-child relationship, often what I see is in the process of when I work with parents, helping them figure out how to support their child to self-regulate better. Often in that process, the parents realize that they're not self-regulating the best they can. And they want to, and they have an opportunity to learn about their own self-regulation and how the nervous system is operating under challenging conditions. And so often it's that back and forth, that symbiotic exchange, so to speak, with where one leads to another, with helping your child learning how to self-regulate also gives you the opportunity to learn as a parent how to self-regulate. I work with a fair amount of parents who, whether as the first concern or as a later concern, acknowledge that they snap at their child and they'll yell at their child, not because they're bad parents, but because in that moment, when you have a child who just keeps doing what you see as the wrong thing and keep, not being able to transition or has meltdown after meltdown, it's hard to stay calm. And so parents say, I just know it's not the right thing to do. And I know, and I'm telling myself, I'm not going to yell at my child. And then they do something for the, 25th time in an hour, and I just lose it. And I just yell at them. And then I feel horrible and I feel guilty. And I tell myself I'll never do it again. And then the next day it happens again. And so my stand on this is, okay, first of all, you're not a bad parent. You're under stress and you're reacting to stress. And in order to help your child self-regulate, you also need to learn how to self-regulate yourself. So that's often part of what I do, because you can't really work on one without the other. And many years ago, when my services were set up differently, or when I worked as an occupational therapist as opposed to coaching as a coach, I would have at times parents who their mindset, they wanted me to really work with their child and fix their child, so to speak, hoping that would do the trick. And often the parent's self-regulation was not addressed in that context, and that, progress could only go so far.
Yeah, you made such an important point, and that's what bothered me when I started Spark Launch is because we are always blaming the neurodivergent person for the responses, right? But are we looking at the environment? Are we looking at the parents? Are we looking at their response? Because I saw that in me. My response had an impact on my son. And so I knew it was not just one person, but when somebody says, oh, take your child to therapy, they're only talking about the child. What about the others? Because we are all responsible. We have to take that responsibility. If not, we're not going to fix it. And we have to drop our egos for that. I think that's our big challenge, because we think we have accomplished a lot, right? Because we've figured out as adults, but we have to drop all that and learn from your child, because children are teaching us so much. They are just beautiful souls with a wealth of information. I'm extremely grateful for my son, the lessons he's taught. Nothing, no school, I think people in our inner circle have a deep, profound impact on us. So we're all teaching each other. I'm sure I taught my son lessons as well. So it's an exchange that's happening.
It is. No, it is. It is. And, good for you for being open to that, and for being willing to challenge yourself and to challenge your own beliefs and of what's right and what's not, and to be curious, because it takes a lot of, however you want to frame it, but it takes a lot of patience, takes a lot of, being able to hold space for your kids, and takes incredible amount of empathy, and so it's hard. But the flip side of that is I see a lot of parents being blamed, and it's just, blame does not work. I mean, it is a motivational technique used by some people, but it's not a good one in my book. And because when we're blamed, like we just, we react, we feel shame, we feel, and we just do things out of reaction, out of, for the wrong reasons. And so you won't, or maybe you will believe, but I've had so many clients who come to me, and then in the context of, working together, have shared how many providers they've worked with who shamed them, who somehow implied indirectly or directly that they weren't doing enough, or you just need to be stricter, or you just need to set more boundaries, or you just need to, and it's possible that they needed to set more boundaries. But when you just, come in a way that just, shames the parents, it's just, all it does is that it perpetuates the cycle of shame. And then the parents are more likely to shame their kids. So it's really, really important. I mean, that's always, the three main principles that I always use in my work is, one, it's neuroaffirming. We don't shame problems that happen because of our nervous system. We can't cheat our nervous system. We can, we can pretend it has different needs, but still going to show up. And then another principle is, family centered, because if something is going to work only with the child, but it's not going to work for the rest of the family, or it's going to ignore the other siblings, and it's not going to work. So it needs to work with the entire family, and we need to look at, the culture of the family, the parenting style, the personalities, whatnot. And the third principle is to be relationship based, because you can't, if you have the all the behaviors that are happening in the context of the parent-child relationship. And we can't improve one without improving the other. And we have to look at, the whole picture. So those are really, so my encouragement is always for parents is that, whoever you work with, whichever country you're in, be aware that some providers with all the right degrees and credentials might still not be the right person for you. They may, they're shaming you. If they're not, then just, move on, because it's I think the fear is that, especially if there's a concern or there's a challenge about finding providers, because maybe the area you live in, or the finances are limited or whatnot, there's this sense of, oh, well, it's better than nothing. And it might be, but in some cases it's worse than nothing.
There has now been a much greater attempt by other neurodivergent, either professionals or just individuals who want things to be a little bit better, of putting together databases and directories of specifically neuro-affirming professionals, clinicians, doctors, just whatever, that would be more comfortable to go to, that would be less traumatic to go to in a lot of instances. And we are seeing a slow push towards that being just as important as anything else on your credentials is being neuroaffirming and wanting to, instead of shaming your traits, wanting to work with your traits and actually involve you in the process.
Yeah, no, that's, I mean, I think we're going in the right direction. It's taking a long time.
Yeah. And it's unfortunate for everybody else who has been has had to go through the trauma that has led us to needing to rapidly fix things. But everything ends up being a lived experience that serves some sort of purpose, I suppose. I guess we have to go through those troubles to get to the better tomorrow for people in the future. So that's how at least I try to view it. Keep me from going crazy. This has been really interesting to listen to as a non-breeder. Just myself, I don't really have like the parental experience. So I'm always fascinated to hear about the parent-child experiences, particularly with neurodivergence. And in a lot of ways, how I kind of wish I didn't know I was neurodivergent as a child. I didn't learn until I was an adult, and how things would have maybe affected me differently if I actually had those frameworks to work with, and I had that self-knowledge and diagnosis to work with. I can like pinpoint a lot of memories in my past that would have gone very differently, and not on anybody else's fault necessarily, just lack of basic knowledge. So thank you for doing what you do, and thank you for wanting to come on here and talk to us about it. Your framework can be life-changing for a great many people. I'm just thinking of I'm thinking about my nephew right now. But how can everyone who is listening reach out to you, find you, and Life Guide Coaching?
So the best way, there are a couple of different ways to find me. One is through my website, lifeguidecoaching.org. I'm also on LinkedIn under my full name, Christian Vinceneux. I'm also on TikTok. So these are the main two social media platforms that I'm on. Otherwise, people are welcome to email me at christian@lifeguidecoaching.org. They can also find the email through my website. So that's another way. And if anyone is listening, if there's any parent who's listening and who's feeling stuck in regards to regulation, for their child with ADHD or autism, I've created this resource, this ebook, and I'm offering it for at no cost at this point. So people just can email me and say, "Hey, heard about your ebook, and can I please get a copy?" Then I'll happily share it.
Oh, awesome! I'll be sure to include information about that in the show notes, along with all of your links. I already know some people I think would really benefit from that book. So once again, thank you so much. You can find Life Guide Coaching in the show notes, a handy dandy link to all of that. Of course, for Spark Launch, we are at sparklaunchpodcast.com and all of your favorite podcast listening platforms, which if you enjoy this show, if you could please rate and review us, that is a big help at helping spread messages such as this one. And for all of us here at Spark Launch, we will see you next time.